Friends, if you want to watch a super hit, record-breaking superhero movie in English that combines thrilling action, deep emotions, jaw-dropping performances, and a story that keeps you glued to your seat, then you must like this video right now. And if this is your first time visiting our channel, welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss exciting breakdowns of blockbuster films. In today's video, the movie we're going to dive into is none other than The Dark Knight, a film that doesn't just entertain, it leaves a permanent impact on your mind with its intense characters, legendary dialogues, and unforgettable scenes. Yes, friends, The Dark Knight is more than just a superhero film. It's a masterpiece that pushed the boundaries of what comic book movies could be. Directed by Christopher Nolan and featuring iconic performances, especially Heath Ledger's terrifying and brilliant take on the Joker, this film has become a gold standard for storytelling in cinema. In this video, we'll talk in great detail about what this movie is all about, why it became a global phenomenon, and what makes it still relevant and celebrated even years later. We'll explore everything you want to know, where to watch the film, whether it's available on any popular OTT platform or satellite channel, and what's the best way to experience this movie for its full emotional and cinematic impact. And of course, we'll dig deep into the behind-the-scenes work, the technical departments, how the filming was done, and what magic happened during the editing and post-production stages. You'll find out about the epic music score, the hauntingly intense sound design, the realistic stunts, and the massive sets that were built to bring Gotham City to life. We'll also talk numbers, yes, the budget, the worldwide box office collection, and how The Dark Knight turned into a financial as well as critical juggernaut. But that's not all. I will walk you through the gripping story of the film, give you a brief review of how the plot unfolds, and highlight the most shocking and memorable moments without spoiling anything for new viewers. We'll look at how the characters evolve, how the stakes keep rising, and how each scene builds on the last with flawless tension and purpose. And, of course, we can't skip the cast. We'll talk about the star-studded lineup, who played which role, how their performances added layers of complexity to the film, and what made Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker so chilling and historic. Whether it's Christian Bale's conflicted yet determined Batman, Aaron Eckhart's tragic turn as Harvey Dent, or Gary Oldman's morally grounded Commissioner Gordon, every actor brought something unforgettable to the screen. So, I request all of you, my friends, to watch this video till the end. You're going to get not just a full overview of The Dark Knight, but also a deeper appreciation for everything that went into making this legendary film what it is today. Let's get started. The Dark Knight unfolds like a masterfully designed game of psychological chess, gritty, unpredictable, and constantly shifting the power dynamic between chaos and control. The film opens not with Batman, but with a cold and calculated bank heist orchestrated by a masked criminal whose identity remains hidden until the final moment. It's here that the Joker is introduced not as a traditional villain, but as a force of pure disruption, an agent of chaos with no interest in money, only in tearing down the system piece by piece. From this explosive beginning, the narrative sets a relentless pace that never truly lets up. The plot centers around Gotham's desperate fight for survival as crime spirals out of control and new heroes rise to challenge the darkness. Bruce Wayne, weary from his double life as Batman, sees a glimmer of hope in the idealistic District Attorney Harvey Dent. Bruce believes Harvey might be the one to lead Gotham into a brighter future without the need for a masked vigilante. This hope becomes the emotional core of the film. Batman wants to hang up the cape, but the Joker forces him to confront the price of that desire. The film structure, while mostly linear, is layered with psychological tension and moral dilemmas that unfold in escalating waves. Key turning points strike with brutal precision. The Joker's threats aren't random. They're designed to push people to their moral limits. A party turns into a hostage situation. A convoy escorting Harvey Dent becomes a battleground under the city's bridges. A hospital visit becomes the trigger for one of the most shocking transformations in comic book cinema history. Each conflict the Joker creates is a trap, a scenario with no good answers, only impossible choices. And the beauty of the narrative lies in how it forces both the characters and the audience to constantly reevaluate what's right and wrong. As the Joker continues his campaign of anarchy, The pressure begins to fracture the pillars of Gotham. Harvey Dent, the city's White Knight, starts to unravel after a devastating personal loss. What was once a beacon of justice becomes a symbol of how far a man can fall when hope turns to vengeance. Harvey's transformation into Two-Face is not just a twist, it's a warning. The Joker doesn't destroy with fists, he destroys with philosophy. He bends the good until they break. The story builds toward two simultaneous climaxes that push every major character to the brink. On one side, Batman must choose between saving lives or preserving justice, as the Joker forces civilians and prisoners into a moral dilemma aboard two ferries rigged with explosives. On the other, Commissioner Gordon and his family are cornered by the newly transformed Two-Face, who now believes fairness comes only through chance, by the flip of a coin. These scenes are not just tense, they're terrifying because they strip away heroism and reveal raw humanity under stress. And then comes one of the most haunting narrative reversals in superhero storytelling. Batman, the symbol of fear and justice, decides to become the villain in the eyes of the public. He takes the fall for Harvey's crimes to protect the image of hope Gotham so desperately needs. This self-sacrificial twist reframes the entire arc, not as a victory, but as a necessary lie to save the soul of a city. The story doesn't end with triumph. It ends with silence, with Batman vanishing into the night, not as a celebrated hero, but as the protector Gotham will blame, because it needs to believe in something better. The narrative of The Dark Knight isn't just clever. It's emotionally grueling, philosophically rich, and thematically dense. It doesn't follow the formula of good defeating evil. It lets evil play the long game. It lets the audience sit with the consequences. And it crafts a story where even the smallest decisions echo with consequences that redefine what a hero really looks like. In The Dark Knight, character development isn't just a feature. It's the very engine that drives the story forward, layer by layer, choice by painful choice. This isn't a film where characters simply react to external events. It's a film where each major player is cracked open and tested, their morals stretched, their loyalty shaken, and their identity forged or broken in the fire of escalating chaos. These are not static figures locked into hero or villain molds. These are characters at war with themselves, and it's that internal war that gives the film its lasting power. Let's begin with Bruce Wayne. On the surface, he's the billionaire with a secret life. But underneath, he's a man running on guilt, grief, and a desperate longing for peace. He doesn't enjoy being Batman, he endures it. He believes that Gotham needs a symbol of fear, not because he wants to inspire terror, but because he wants to end crime in a way the legal system can't. But Bruce is tired, emotionally and morally. He wants an exit, a way to hand off the responsibility to someone who can make change without a mask. That's why Harvey Dent becomes so important to him, not just as a political figure, but as a symbol of hope. Bruce wants to believe that Harvey can save the city so that he doesn't have to anymore. That's his flaw and his tragedy. Because even as he tries to pass the torch, he can't control what comes next. The weight of that failure will follow him long after the final scene. Harvey Dent's character arc is the most devastating in the film because it feels so real. He begins as the golden boy of Gotham, someone who actually believes in the system, someone unafraid to take on criminals head-on in court. He's charming, brave, and fiercely idealistic, but he's also human. His strength is also his vulnerability. He wants justice so badly that he starts making compromises, first small, then life-changing. When he loses Rachel, his one emotional anchor, and is physically scarred in an explosion that was meant for her, Harvey fractures both physically and psychologically. That duality becomes literal in the form of Two-Face. But it's more than just a name. Harvey's transformation is the film's deepest tragedy. He doesn't become a villain because he wants to hurt people. He becomes one because he thinks fairness now lies in randomness. If the system failed him, then chance becomes the only honest judge. One flip of a coin decides life or death. His fall represents the Joker's greatest success, not killing Gotham's White Knight, but corrupting him. The Joker, however, is the wild card that exposes everyone's limits. What makes him terrifying isn't his violence, but his ideology. He has no origin story, no clear motive. He doesn't want money, doesn't want revenge, doesn't want control. He wants to see the world unravel. He wants to watch people tear each other apart when the rules break down. His brilliance lies in his ability to read people, exploit their fears, and manipulate them into chaos. He takes Gotham's best and breaks them, not with force, but with philosophy. His interactions with each character are psychological experiments. He doesn't just threaten people, he forces them to make impossible moral decisions. And the more they resist, the more he pushes until the line between right and wrong collapses. He's not a man. He's a test, and he leaves behind wreckage not just of buildings but of souls. Commissioner Gordon, meanwhile, is the moral backbone trying to hold everything together. He walks a line between law and necessity. He knows the system is flawed but still believes in rules. His relationship with Batman is built on mutual respect but also burdened by secrecy. When the stakes rise, Gordon has to fake his death, lie to his family, and ultimately agree to a massive cover-up. By the end, even he is compromised, not because he's weak, but because Gotham needs a myth more than it needs the truth. His arc isn't about transformation, it's about erosion. He holds on to his values for as long as he can, but even he bends under the weight of the world collapsing around him. Rachel Dawes adds another layer to this character tapestry. She's caught between Bruce's past and Harvey's present, but she isn't just a love interest. She's the emotional compass for both men. She sees the path each one is on, and she makes her own decision to build a future with Harvey, not out of spite, but because she believes in his cause. Her death isn't just a plot twist. It's a seismic rupture in the story. It breaks Harvey, breaks Bruce, and cements the Joker's philosophy that chaos wins. But it also forces both men to look in the mirror and confront what they've become. Alfred and Lucius Fox, though in supporting roles, represent the conscience and the limits of Bruce's mission. Alfred's wisdom comes through hard truths. He reminds Bruce that some men just want to watch the world burn. He also warns Bruce that sacrifices may not be noble or rewarding, but they must still be made. Lucius, on the other hand, draws the ethical line. When Bruce creates an invasive surveillance system to find the Joker, Lucius helps, but only once, and only if it's dismantled after. These characters reinforce that even allies have boundaries, and that heroism can be compromised from within. Even unnamed characters like the ferry passengers and the convict holding the detonator are given moral weight. In a lesser film, they'd just be background. But here, they symbolize Gotham's collective soul. And when one prisoner throws the trigger out the window, defying the Joker's expectations, it becomes a silent turning point. The city may still have a chance. Every character in The Dark Knight is crafted with intention. Their arcs aren't just about action or dialogue. They're about who they become under pressure, what they choose when every choice comes with consequences, and how their relationships reflect the themes of fear, hope, and sacrifice. The result is a character-driven epic where no one escapes unchanged, and every decision echoes far beyond the screen. The performances in The Dark Knight are the beating heart of its legacy. Every actor, whether headlining the film or appearing in a handful of scenes, contributes to a world that feels dangerous, alive, and emotionally layered. This isn't just casting done right. It's casting that elevates the material into something far more powerful than a superhero spectacle. These performances turn archetypes into real people and Gotham into a moral battlefield. Let's start with Christian Bale, who brings an introspective complexity to Bruce Wayne. What makes Bale's performance so compelling is not just the physicality he brings to Batman, the intense fight scenes, the imposing body language, the intimidating growl, it's the torment underneath. Bruce Wayne is a man shaped by trauma, but he's also increasingly disillusioned with what he's become. Bale masterfully balances the cold determination of the vigilante with the suppressed vulnerability of a man who desperately wishes someone else could save the city, so he could finally stop. His moments with Alfred are particularly revealing. In them, Bale lets down the mask, literally and emotionally, and we get glimpses of someone exhausted, afraid, and unsure of his own moral boundaries. The performance isn't just heroic. It's painful, deeply conflicted, and full of restraint. But even with a strong central performance, there's no question that Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker dominates the film's energy. This is one of those performances that doesn't just define a character, it redefines the genre. Ledger's Joker is terrifying not because he's unpredictable, but because he's horrifyingly logical in his own twisted way. Every line feels unscripted, yet meticulously calculated. From the way he shuffles toward a burning pile of money to how he casually toys with both criminals and cops, Ledger's choices are hypnotic. There's an infectious madness in his laugh, a grim satisfaction in his silences, and a terrifying calm in his outbursts. It's a character performance that's somehow both volcanic and surgical. He doesn't play the Joker for cheap thrills. He plays him like a philosopher of mayhem, someone out to prove that morality is just a polite lie we tell ourselves when we feel safe. And Ledger never winks at the audience. He's fully committed, fully immersed, and completely unforgettable. Aaron Eckhart's transformation as Harvey Dent is another cornerstone of the film. Eckhart delivers one of the most difficult arcs in modern storytelling, a righteous man's descent into something monstrous. As Harvey, he's magnetic, charismatic, brave, idealistic. You want to believe in him. But the subtle cracks start early. He's willing to bend rules for justice, he's driven by personal emotions, and when he loses Rachel, that restraint shatters. Eckhart's shift into Two-Face is haunting because he doesn't just become angry. He becomes empty. He speaks in a cold, detached tone, and Eckhart plays it with the calm menace of someone who believes he's beyond salvation. His Two-Face isn't a ranting villain. He's a ruined man, hollowed out by pain and convinced that justice only comes from chance. The emotional honesty of his performance makes his fall feel tragic, not theatrical. Michael Caine's Alfred brings both gravitas and humanity to the story. He's not just the wise butler, he's the one man who truly knows Bruce's heart. Caine's performance is layered with affection, worry, and unspoken grief. He delivers some of the film's most profound lines with a kind of world weariness that makes them hit harder than any action scene. You can see that Alfred sees Bruce not just as a hero, but as a son. One he fears is slipping into darkness with every choice he makes. Caine's warmth and steady presence provide the emotional foundation the film needs amid all the chaos. Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon is the everyman surrounded by extraordinary madness. He's often overlooked in discussions about this film, but his performance is essential. Oldman brings a weary realism to Gordon, someone who's just trying to do the right thing in a city that keeps testing him. He's not flashy. He doesn't wear a cape, but his courage is unmistakable. Whether he's faking his death, taking down corrupt officers, or delivering the closing monologue, Oldman plays Gordon with deep conviction. His chemistry with both Batman and Harvey Dent is subtle but powerful. It gives weight to their shared cause, and later, their shared tragedy. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox is the embodiment of calm, controlled reason. Freeman's voice and presence alone carry wisdom, but what makes his performance shine is the quiet rebellion he offers. Lucius helps Bruce, yes, but he has lines he won't cross. Freeman plays Lucius as a man of principle, someone who offers support with boundaries. His scenes offer levity, logic, and the kind of ethical resistance that deepens the film's moral complexity. When he agrees to help with the surveillance system but insists it be destroyed afterward, Freeman delivers that demand not with fury but with quiet strength, and it's more powerful because of that. Even the secondary cast delivers. Eric Roberts plays crime boss Sal Maroni with the slick confidence of someone who thinks he's in control until he realizes he's just another pawn. Cillian Murphy returns briefly as the Scarecrow, slipping effortlessly back into his eerie, calculating presence. And the actors on the ferries, especially the convict played by Tommy Lister, bring a surprising emotional depth to what could have been a simple plot device. When Lister's character throws the detonator out the window, the entire ferry sequence shifts. It becomes a powerful moment of human decency winning out, made possible by a performance that says so much without needing many words. The cast as a whole functions like a symphony, every part working in harmony, each adding its own texture and resonance. These performances don't just support the film's themes, they embody them. They add soul to spectacle, weight to philosophy, and emotion to every frame. Without these actors bringing their A-game, The Dark Knight could have been just another comic book movie. But with them, it became something else entirely, a psychological epic told through deeply human characters. Every glare, pause, sigh, and scream has meaning, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Christopher Nolan's direction in The Dark Knight isn't just about making a Batman movie, it's about redefining what a superhero film can be. His approach is bold, visionary, and utterly meticulous, turning what could have been a straightforward good versus evil story into a dense, brooding, morally complex crime saga. Nolan doesn't direct with flair for flair's sake. He builds atmosphere, sculpts dread, and orchestrates philosophical battles with the precision of a master craftsman. Every frame, every cut, every pause is intentional. You don't just watch The Dark Knight, you're pulled into its rhythm, forced to navigate its tension, and left wrestling with its questions long after it ends. What sets Nolan apart from many other blockbuster directors is his unwavering commitment to realism, especially within a genre that traditionally leans on fantasy. His Gotham isn't a stylized comic book world. It's a living, breathing, urban pressure cooker filled with corruption, desperation, and fragile hope. He shoots the city like a modern-day battleground, filled with glass towers, dark alleys, and crowds on the brink of panic. He often uses natural lighting and practical effects to keep things grounded. Even when extraordinary events happen, like a hospital exploding or a truck flipping end over end, there's a tangible weight to it. You feel the danger because it looks and feels real. Nolan's insistence on doing as many stunts as possible in camera gives the film a gritty authenticity that digital trickery simply can't replicate. One of Nolan's signature strengths is his ability to construct narrative tension without losing emotional depth. The film never pauses to spell everything out. Instead, it flows with a quiet urgency, scenes bleeding into one another as stakes escalate and morals bend. He employs cross-cutting with surgical precision, nowhere more brilliantly than in the ferry sequence near the climax. Two boats, both loaded with innocence and convicts, each holding the other's fate in their hands, while Joker oversees it all from a distant tower. Nolan jumps between locations, perspectives, and decisions with mounting suspense, tightening the emotional screws with each passing second. It's not just edge-of-your-seat tension, it's a cinematic moral experiment unfolding in real time. His pacing is sharp but patient. At over 2.5 hours, the film never drags, but it never rushes either. Nolan knows when to let a scene breathe and when to cut it off. Quiet, dialogue-heavy moments are given the same weight and care as action scenes. Take Bruce and Alfred's conversations. Nolan allows pauses to linger, eyes to hold, voices to crack. He knows that exposition isn't just information, it's emotion, its theme, its character. Stylistically, Nolan makes some bold, genre-defying choices. One of the most striking is how he strips the film of many comic book conventions. There's no supernatural villain. There are no extravagant powers. There's no glossy filter over the visuals. Instead, he frames The Dark Knight like a psychological crime drama, a neo-noir in a superhero skin. He favors long takes, minimal slow motion, and carefully chosen color palettes. Blues, grays, and harsh lighting dominate, creating a cold, urban atmosphere that reflects the ethical decay of the city. His use of IMAX cameras for large set pieces was groundbreaking at the time and still hits hard today. The sweeping views of Gotham from rooftops, the dizzying aerial shots during Batman's dive into Hong Kong, the chaos of the armored truck chase, these sequences don't just impress visually, they envelop the viewer in the scale of the stakes. Tone is perhaps Nolan's greatest weapon in this film. The Dark Knight is dark, not in the sense of just being violent or brooding, but in the way it refuses to provide easy answers. Nolan walks a razor-thin line between hope and nihilism. He presents a city where institutions are crumbling, where even the most principled men can be broken, and where the hero isn't cheered but hunted. Yet amid all this, he still finds glimmers of humanity. He still believes in the possibility of people doing the right thing, even when it costs them everything. Nolan controls this tone with unwavering consistency. He doesn't let a single joke, scene, or musical cue undercut the mood. Even when there's humor, like the Joker's darkly comic threats, it's laced with menace. And then there's the way he handles themes. Nolan's direction is deeply intellectual, but never cold. He doesn't tell you what to think. He sets up ethical dilemmas, lets characters act, and leaves you to wrestle with what it all means. Should Bruce have built a city-wide surveillance system? Was Gordon right to lie to the public? Was Harvey's downfall inevitable or engineered? Nolan doesn't preach, he challenges. He respects his audience's intelligence and demands their attention. The performances he draws from his cast are another testament to his leadership. Heath Ledger's Joker is unforgettable not only because of Ledger's own brilliance, but because Nolan gave him the freedom and space to be unpredictable. He didn't overdirect or overcut. He let Ledger's silences, body language, and twisted philosophy simmer. Similarly, Bale, Eckhart, Oldman, and Kane deliver layered, restrained, deeply human performances because Nolan creates an environment where character matters just as much as plot. Even the film's ending is a testament to Nolan's directional confidence. He doesn't go for a triumphant climax. He ends on a lie, on sacrifice, on ambiguity. Batman isn't celebrated, he's blamed. The hero becomes a fugitive. That final sequence, with Gordon's narration over Batman's flight into darkness, isn't a victory lap. It's a mourning march, and yet it lands with thunderous emotional power.
Why?
Because Nolan earns it. Because every choice he makes leads to that final moment with perfect, tragic logic. Christopher Nolan doesn't just direct The Dark Knight. He engineers it like a ticking clock, hiding layers of emotion and ideology within its gears. His direction is unflashy yet unforgettable, grand in scale yet intimate in detail. He doesn't follow genre rules, he rewrites them. And by the time the credits roll, you realize you haven't just watched a superhero film. You've witnessed an epic, built by a director who believed in pushing boundaries, blurring lines, and taking the genre into uncharted territory. The cinematography of The Dark Knight, guided by Wally Pfister's lens and Christopher Nolan's vision, isn't just a technical achievement. It's visual storytelling at its most purposeful and atmospheric. Every shot feels like a carefully considered piece of the film's moral and psychological architecture. What makes it truly remarkable is that it doesn't rely on overly stylized filters or flashy camera gimmicks. Instead, it embraces clarity, depth, and realism, using these tools to heighten tension, mood, and emotion. Pfister's cinematography builds Gotham not as a fantasy city, but as a living, breathing, deeply troubled urban jungle. It's a city of glass and concrete, reflection and distortion, a visual metaphor for the moral chaos unfolding within. One of the most revolutionary aspects of the film's cinematography is Nolan and Pfister's use of IMAX cameras for key sequences. At the time, this wasn't just rare, it was virtually unheard of for a narrative feature. They didn't use it as a gimmick, but as an immersive tool. The image quality is richer, the frame taller, and the effect immediate. You feel swallowed by the scale. When Batman glides across the Hong Kong skyline, or when the Joker orchestrates his assault during the armored convoy chase, the use of IMAX makes everything feel monumental and inescapable. These aren't just big set pieces. They're moments of narrative escalation, captured with a sense of epic physicality. You're not just watching these scenes, you're standing inside them. The color grading and palette of The Dark Knight is a character in itself. Gotham is painted in steel blues, sickly grays, washed-out yellows, and deep blacks. It's a city drained of warmth. You rarely see a splash of comforting color. This choice isn't aesthetic minimalism, it's thematic alignment. The cold, colorless tones mirror a world where law, order, and morality are falling apart. Scenes set in police stations, courtrooms, alleyways, and rooftops all share this visual language, where shadows dominate and fluorescent lighting buzzes in the background like a warning siren. Even the interiors of Wayne Enterprises and Bruce's penthouse, spaces of power and wealth, feel sterile and subdued. Everything feels emotionally muted because the characters are emotionally trapped. Framing is used to tell the story just as powerfully as the dialogue. The Joker is often framed in asymmetrical shots, off-center and unpredictable. He doesn't fit in the frame the way other characters do. It's subtle, but your eye notices the discomfort. It mirrors how the Joker doesn't fit into the social or moral order. When he crashes the fundraiser or invades the police convoy, he dominates the space not just with his presence, but with how the camera surrenders to him. On the other hand, Bruce Wayne is often shown in symmetrical, composed framing, balanced but burdened. His posture, his gaze, his surroundings, they all reflect his constant effort to maintain control in a world that's spinning out of it. Lighting in The Dark Knight is another subtle but essential storytelling device. The use of natural light, especially in daytime scenes, is minimal but controlled. Most scenes are cloaked in shadow or illuminated by artificial light sources, street lamps, flickering bulbs, or the cold glow of office buildings. This creates a claustrophobic feeling, even in open spaces. The darkness doesn't only come out at night, it's inescapable. One of the most iconic uses of lighting is in the interrogation scene. Batman and the Joker are in a fluorescent-lit room, flat and almost colorless, exposing every line and pore of their faces. There's nowhere to hide. It's psychological exposure, both literally and symbolically. That harsh white light becomes a crucible where both characters show their true selves. Contrast that with Harvey Dent's transformation. Before his accident, he's lit like a man of promise, clean, crisp, direct. After becoming Two-Face, the lighting changes dramatically. He's shot in profile, half his face bathed in light, the other half swallowed in darkness. It's not subtle, it's deliberate visual storytelling. He is a man literally split by tragedy, and the camera makes sure you feel that duality in every scene he appears in after the explosion. Camera movement also evolves with mood. During quieter, introspective moments, like Bruce speaking with Alfred or Harvey in the courtroom, the camera is still or moves gently, allowing the dialogue and performance to breathe. But during action sequences, the cinematography becomes kinetic but never chaotic. The truck chase sequence, one of the most praised action scenes in cinema, is shot with incredible spatial awareness. You always know where everyone is, what direction they're moving in, and how the geography affects the stakes. Nolan and Pfister never fall into the trap of quick cuts or shaky cam. Instead, they use wide angles, tracking shots, and grounded coverage to immerse the viewer while maintaining visual clarity. Then there are the quiet, poetic moments that sneak up on you visually. Like the Joker hanging his head out of the police car window, hair blowing in the wind, eyes closed, soaking in the mayhem like a twisted form of peace. There's no dialogue in that scene, just an image. A moving painting of a man who's found serenity in chaos. Or Batman standing silently in a ruined building, cape flickering behind him, as the city he's trying to save crumbles under the weight of its own contradictions. These are the images that stay in your mind, not because they're explosive, but because they're haunting. The use of depth in shot composition is another subtle tool. Gotham feels layered, foregrounds, midgrounds, and backgrounds are all active. You often see characters walking through crowds, past surveillance screens, with distant figures watching from rooftops or windows. This spatial complexity builds the feeling that Gotham is always watching, always teetering, always alive with tension. No one feels truly alone. No one feels truly safe. What Wally Pfister's cinematography achieves is something rare. It doesn't just capture scenes, it reveals them. It shapes how we feel about characters before they speak. It sets the rhythm of suspense before a gun is drawn. It builds Gotham as a city of verticality, claustrophobia, and moral ambiguity. Every corner hides something. Every shadow could be a threat or a savior. It's visual storytelling that doesn't distract from the plot. It is the plot, told through image, texture, contrast, and motion. And in The Dark Knight, it turns the camera into a silent but relentless observer of a world that's slipping into madness. The editing and pacing of The Dark Knight function like a tightly tuned symphony of chaos, methodical yet full of dread, urgent yet controlled, constantly building momentum without sacrificing clarity or emotion. Lee Smith's editing doesn't simply stitch scenes together. It drives the emotional and psychological heartbeat of the film. The flow is relentless, yet somehow spacious. Tension breathes. Characters unravel in real time. There's no wasted moment, no lingering that overstays its welcome, and no jump that feels unearned. The pacing works like an invisible current pulling the viewer along from one revelation to the next, one moral dilemma after another, and it does so with remarkable elegance for a film carrying so many themes, characters, and interweaving narratives. What's truly stunning is how seamlessly the editing handles the film's multiple plotlines. You have Bruce Wayne wrestling with his identity, Harvey Dent's rise and fall, Joker's anarchic reign, Gordon's internal conflict, Rachel's complicated loyalties, and the ever-present question of Gotham's soul. These aren't side plots, they're co-leads in a narrative ensemble. Yet not once does the film feel disjointed or overcrowded. Scenes transition with thematic resonance rather than just chronology. For instance, a Joker monologue will dissolve into a boardroom discussion about moral compromise, or a public funeral will fade into a shot of Batman surveying the skyline. These aren't just cuts. They're story transitions that mirror character psychology, drawing emotional threads between different parts of the city, different players in the game. The first act is swift but never rushed. It's pure narrative propulsion. The iconic opening bank robbery is edited with razor-sharp timing. Each betrayal, each gunshot, each cold stare is framed and cut with mechanical precision. As the Joker's plan unfolds, the tension doesn't rise through volume or speed. It builds through rhythm. The sequence never lingers on any shot too long, nor does it whip past them. It's confident, patient, and surgical. That opening scene alone sets the tempo for the entire film. Nothing is wasted, and everything means something. As the second act kicks in, the stakes escalate, and so does the film's editorial complexity. Smith doesn't rely on flashy transitions or visual tricks. Instead, he leans into mood and implication. Scenes bleed into one another not just visually, but thematically. A moment of moral doubt cuts directly into a burst of violence. A city council speech flows into a hostage execution. The editing becomes an emotional roller coaster. It keeps you on edge by never letting the tension fully resolve. The film doesn't build to a climax, it builds to several, stacked and layered, each compounding the last. By the time you hit the ferry scene, you've already lived through a SWAT ambush, an exploded hospital, a courtroom meltdown, and an ethical unraveling. And yet, somehow, the film still has energy to burn. And then there's that third act, where the pacing turns truly masterful. You'd think by this point the audience would be exhausted. But the editing finds a new gear. The tension doesn't explode outward. It coils tighter. The dual ferry hostage situation is a masterclass in cross-cutting. It's not just about suspense. It's about moral suspense. Will the innocent kill the guilty to survive? Will the guilty prove more humane than expected? The film jumps between boats, the Joker's vantage point, and Batman's pursuit like a conductor leading a crescendo. Every cut is a decision. Every shot holds you in judgment. The scene itself becomes a clock, ticking towards something inevitable, or maybe something miraculous. The editing is invisible here, not because it hides, but because it feels inevitable. You couldn't arrange the pieces any other way. Let's not forget the emotional pacing. The film doesn't just manage action, it choreographs emotional descent. Harvey Dent's story, in particular, is tracked through a meticulous editorial rhythm. His scenes gradually shorten, become more direct, more fractured. Early scenes with him are longer, more dialogue-heavy, more controlled. Post-transformation, they're clipped, brutal, reactive. Even the pacing of his lines changes. And the editing responds in kind, treating him not as a constant, but as a character devolving into chaos. The editing isn't just cutting time, it's cutting character. Another incredible editorial achievement is the restraint. The Dark Knight is over 2.5 hours long, but it never drags. Why? Because the film knows when to hold a moment and when to cut it off. That balance is everything. A lesser film might have milked dramatic scenes for tears or padded action for spectacle. But The Dark Knight understands momentum. Take Alfred's fireside monologue about the bandit in Burma. It's slow, quiet, and visually static. But the pacing within the edit gives it enormous weight. That moment lands not because of music or camera tricks, but because the film slows down just enough to let you feel its wisdom, and then immediately returns to the tension. Then there's the structure of the Joker's presence. His appearances are timed like jump scares, but executed like chess moves. The film spaces out his scenes just enough that he never becomes predictable. You never know when he'll strike, but when he does, the rhythm changes. His entrances are edited with impact, abrupt, jarring, memorable. Think of him appearing unannounced at the fundraiser or exploding into the police station. The editing treats him like a force of nature, and the audience feels that. The longer he's off-screen, the more dangerous he becomes in your mind. The final montage is another editing marvel. As Gordon gives his voiceover about the lie they've chosen to tell, the film cuts between moments of loss, sacrifice, and retreat. There's no score swelling for a triumphant finish. The pace here becomes solemn, deliberate. It mirrors a funeral procession more than a hero send-off. It's quiet devastation, timed to every emotional beat. The final shots are haunting not because of what they show, but because of how long they stay. The cut doesn't come when you expect it. It holds. It hurts. The rhythm of The Dark Knight isn't just fast or slow. It's emotionally strategic. It knows when to let you breathe and when to suffocate. It orchestrates scenes so that dialogue, action, and character development feel like part of the same ongoing breath. The result is a film that feels simultaneously massive in scale and intimate in detail. The editing doesn't just hold the story together. It makes it surge forward like a wave you can't escape. From frame one to frame final, the pace never falters. It just evolves, sharpens, deepens. And by the time that bat symbol fades into darkness, you realize the film hasn't just kept you entertained. It's kept you cornered, captivated, and completely under its spell. The soundtrack and score of The Dark Knight aren't just pieces of music layered over moving images. They are the psychological scaffolding of the film. They dictate how we feel, how we interpret what we see, and how we process moments of silence, chaos, dread, or fragile hope. Composers Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard don't rely on traditional motifs or sweeping orchestral cues to establish tone. Instead, they construct an audio experience that feels more like a looming presence than a musical accompaniment. It pulses, it stalks, it coils in the background, shaping each frame with tension and unease. Let's begin with the sonic embodiment of the Joker. His musical identity is iconic not because of melody, but because of discomfort. A rising, searing sound built around a single, sustained note, created using an electric cello, distorted guitar feedback, and razor-like electronics, becomes a sonic metaphor for the Joker's unpredictability. It doesn't comfort or resolve. It grates. It builds like a pressure headache, crawling under your skin until your nerves are frayed. And that's exactly the point. Zimmer said he wanted the Joker's theme to feel like a threat without being a theme. It reflects not just the Joker's chaos, but the anticipation of it. You hear that sound, and instinctively you tense. It's like a warning siren, but without the mercy of volume control. That sense of menace bleeds into every scene he's in. Whether he's dangling a man from a window or monologuing about scars, that high-pitched drone hangs in the air like an itch you can't scratch. It keeps you alert. It denies you relief. Even when he's silent, the score behind him speaks volumes. It tells us that danger isn't coming. It's already here. Now contrast that with Batman's sonic architecture. His theme, while slightly more traditional, is far from heroic. It's built on two notes, barely a motif, and it rises slowly, mechanically, almost as if it's dragging itself up a cliff. Zimmer designed it to sound like restraint, like a storm held back by willpower. The instrumentation is industrial, full of thumping basses, metallic clangs, and grinding textures. This is not the score of a caped crusader flying through the clouds. This is the score of a tormented vigilante clawing through the grime of a city that doesn't want to be saved. It feels weighty, grounded, full of burden. When the Batpod explodes through a wall or the Batmobile takes a hit, the music doesn't soar. It crashes forward with all the force of Batman's desperation. Then there's Harvey Dent. His musical tone shifts as he does. Early on, Howard gives him subtle strings and a sense of forward momentum. It feels hopeful, clean, almost idealistic. But as Dent fractures and becomes Two-Face, that motif collapses. The strings twist into discord, the rhythm loses structure, and the score begins to reflect his shattered psyche. It's never melodramatic. It doesn't announce his transformation with grand fanfare. It lets the music erode, quietly, until what once felt noble now sounds dangerous. Silence is another tool the score uses masterfully. There are moments in The Dark Knight where the absence of music becomes deafening. In a scene like Batman's interrogation of the Joker, you'll notice that the music steps back completely. All you hear are boots on concrete, punches, the scrape of a chair, and the Joker's unhinged cackle echoing off tile. That void of sound is not an oversight, it's a trap. By stripping away the score, the film removes any emotional guideposts. We're left to sit in the raw, ugly violence of the moment. No dramatic strings. No cathartic swells. Just two ideologies colliding in a room with no way out. And when the score returns, it doesn't soothe. It re-enters with tension, a quiet escalation that creeps in like dread through a crack in the wall. The ferry sequence near the climax is one of the most brilliant showcases of musical tension in modern cinema. Zimmer and Howard use repetitive rhythmic pulses, increasing tempo, and layered instrumentation to build unbearable suspense. It's minimal. It's disciplined. But the pressure it creates is almost physical. You don't just watch the dilemma. You feel it building in your chest. The score doesn't manipulate your emotions. It syncs with your biological response. Your heartbeat matches the rhythm. Your breath slows in anticipation. You're not just observing the countdown. You're trapped in it. There's also incredible subtlety in the emotional music of the film. The cue that plays when Bruce tells Alfred he can't endure this anymore, or when Gordon mourns what Harvey has become, or even in Rachel's letter scene. Those musical pieces are sparse, gentle, almost hesitant. They don't command tears. They allow space for reflection. The piano, strings, and ambient tones all float in softly, letting the emotion arise naturally from the characters and the moment. It's emotional support, not manipulation. And then we reach the final sequence, the montage where Batman takes the fall for Harvey's crimes. The music that carries the scene, titled A Dark Knight, doesn't rush. It's long, slow, mournful, and grand without being flashy. It builds over 9 minutes, layering textures that rise and fall like Gotham's heartbeat. There's a noble darkness to it. It's not a cue about victory. It's about the cost of holding a city together. The horns rise like a funeral march. The strings stretch with aching restraint. And as Gordon declares Batman as the hero Gotham deserves, the score lets the tragedy settle, not with a bang, but with a lingering echo. It doesn't leave you triumphant. It leaves you haunted. Throughout The Dark Knight, Zimmer and Howard never treat the music as mere accompaniment. It's another layer of the storytelling. It reveals what characters won't say. It warns of what's to come. It lingers where pain exists. And it always, feels like it belongs not just in the film, but of the film. It is atmospheric architecture. It wraps the audience in a sonic grip that doesn't loosen even after the credits roll. Whether it's silence, sustained tension, or explosive action, the score breathes life into the film's darkest corners. It is as integral to the identity of The Dark Knight as the cape, the cowl, or the Joker's smile. The themes and messages of The Dark Knight don't sit in the background like quiet moral suggestions. They stalk the narrative, confront the viewer, and demand uncomfortable reflection. Christopher Nolan's 2008 Juggernaut doesn't just entertain, it provokes. It doesn't ask what justice is. It asks what justice costs. It doesn't celebrate heroes. It dissects them. It doesn't pit good against evil like a comic book would. Instead, it blends the two until you're no longer sure where one ends and the other begins. What unfolds is a web of philosophical dilemmas, emotional sacrifices, and societal critiques that are as timely today as they were the day this film was released. At the film's thematic core is the volatile tension between chaos and order. The Joker, a character often mislabeled as a villain with no goal, is in fact a philosopher of destruction. He's not driven by greed or power. He's driven by the idea that order is a lie, that structure is flimsy, and that civilization is only one tragedy away from collapse. He constructs social experiments, turning people against each other, staging moral traps, and watches with glee to see if his thesis proves true. He's less a character and more a concept, chaos personified. His mission isn't to kill Batman. It's to corrupt him, to pull Gotham's symbol of justice into moral compromise. And the frightening part? He nearly succeeds. The message is clear. Chaos isn't a storm. It's a whisper. It seduces. It offers freedom disguised as destruction. Then comes the counterweight. Batman, the protector of order. But even he doesn't represent pure law. Bruce Wayne operates outside the system, undermining the institutions he claims to defend. He's a contradiction, a vigilante for justice. The film interrogates this contradiction. When Batman beats a suspect for information, rigs a mass surveillance system to catch the Joker, or lies to protect Gotham's soul, he becomes less a man of principle and more a man of necessity. The question becomes whether order can survive without compromising its own values. If protecting peace requires embracing chaos, what's left of the peace? This takes us to duality, a theme that shapes every major character. Harvey Dent is the most literal embodiment, a man split between two extremes. As Gotham's White Knight, he believes in the system, in trials, in the power of law. But his descent into Two-Face exposes how fragile moral certainty can be when faced with personal loss. One moment of trauma is all it takes to turn a man who believes in justice into a man who flips a coin to decide who lives and dies. Batman, too, is a dual figure. He lives a lie to serve the truth. He hides in darkness to protect the light. Even the Joker plays with duality, pretending to be unpredictable while orchestrating every detail. Nothing in The Dark Knight is what it seems, and every character wrestles with their internal mirror. That leads into the film's haunting exploration of moral ambiguity. Few movies are willing to make their heroes look like villains, but this one thrives on it. The final act is built on a lie. Harvey Dent's crimes are blamed on Batman, not because it's true, but because it's useful. Gotham needs a hero, not a tragedy. And so Batman becomes the fall guy. The message is brutal. Truth isn't always the highest good. Sometimes hope requires fiction. This moral compromise, this willingness to twist the truth to preserve the illusion of justice, is what makes The Dark Knight so enduringly relevant. It poses the question, is it acceptable to lie for the greater good? And worse, who gets to decide what that greater good is? Another pillar of the narrative is fear and control. Both Batman and the Joker understand the power of fear. Batman cultivates it to terrify criminals. The Joker uses it to dissolve the public's trust and safety. What separates them isn't their weapon, it's their goal. Batman uses fear to prevent crime. The Joker uses it to reveal people's true selves. In that sense, fear isn't just an emotion in the film, it's a tool, and how that tool is used defines whether the user is savior or destroyer. The film also offers a quietly devastating meditation on hope and disillusionment. Harvey Dent begins as the hope of Gotham. He's clean, lawful, and brave. But the city eats him alive. It chews up its hero and spits out a monster. That transformation underscores a recurring message. In a corrupt world, idealism isn't rewarded, it's punished. The only way to protect goodness is to disguise it, as Batman ultimately does. He carries the blame for Harvey's sins to keep the illusion of hope alive. It's one of the most powerful thematic punches in modern cinema. Sometimes, the right thing to do is the most painful. Then there's the nature of heroism itself. Most films give us heroes who are celebrated, admired, applauded. The Dark Knight gives us a hero who is hated by the people he saves. A man who chooses to be misunderstood so that someone else can be honored. It's a brutal, sacrificial version of heroism, Not about glory, but about endurance. Bruce Wayne doesn't want applause.
He wants peace.
But he accepts that his role may require him to live as a villain in the public's eyes. This reframes the hero's journey entirely. It's not about becoming a legend. It's about bearing a burden no one else will. And all of this culminates in one final question that the film refuses to answer for you. Can we truly be good in a world that's broken? Can laws hold when the enemy doesn't follow them? Can morality stand when evil exploits it? Can order survive in the presence of chaos? The fairy sequence makes this question visceral. Strangers are given the power to destroy one another. The Joker bets on human selfishness. But in that moment, the people on the boats don't destroy each other. It's the only time in the film where goodness wins without a lie, without violence. And yet, even that act of virtue is hidden in the shadows of the Joker's larger game. What makes The Dark Knight unforgettable isn't just that it explores these themes, it's how organically they flow through the plot. They're not tacked on. They're not in monologues. They live in the action, in the choices characters make under pressure, in the moral gray zones where most superhero stories fear to tread. The film isn't just about Gotham. It's about us. Our fears, our compromises, our need for heroes, and our inability to accept their flaws. That's what lingers long after the credits fade. Not the capes, not the gadgets, but the terrifying, exhilarating thought that justice might come at a price we're not ready to pay. In The Dark Knight, the use of visual effects and CGI isn't loud, flamboyant, or even flashy. It's intelligent, meticulously restrained, and masterfully blended with practical elements to maintain a raw, gritty realism that few superhero films dare to pursue. Christopher Nolan's vision for Gotham wasn't of a hyper-stylized, comic book city floating in fantasy. It was grounded, tactile, and disturbingly plausible. That vision dictated the role of visual effects, to disappear. And paradoxically, it's this near invisibility of the effects that makes them so effective. From the start, Nolan made it clear he preferred physical, practical filmmaking. His team, including VFX supervisor Nick Davis and special effects supervisor Chris Corbould, approached every scene with one central question: can we do this for real? The answer, more often than not, was yes. The film famously flips a full-size semi-truck in the middle of downtown Chicago, not with CGI, but with hydraulics and physics. A steel rod was embedded underneath the vehicle and triggered to send it nose up in the air, rotating like a doomed tower before it crashes violently onto its roof. That's not just spectacle, that's pure kinetic truth. And because it actually happened, your brain registers every bounce, every twist, every crushed piece of metal as real. You don't just see it, you feel it in your bones. That entire convoy sequence is a practical effects playground. Cars collide with weight. Bullets impact glass with believable force. Explosions bloom with heat and grit. There's no rubbery CGI physics, no digital blur to cover shortcuts. When Batman ejects from the destroyed tumbler and emerges on the Batpod, that isn't a computer rendering. That's a fully built, functioning motorcycle with massive wheels and a futuristic design, ridden by a real stuntman weaving through real traffic. It doesn't just look cool. It feels plausible, even terrifying, because it occupies the same physical space as everything else. That tactile believability is everything. But Nolan isn't a purist for practicality. He's a tactician. When CGI is necessary, it's deployed like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Take the aerial shots of Batman gliding between buildings in Hong Kong. Those wide, sweeping visuals were achieved using a mix of stunt wirework and digital enhancements to erase harnesses, extend buildings, or enhance the cityscape. You're watching a composite of practical action and subtle CGI that never draws attention to itself. There's no glowing digital aura or showy superhero landing. Just the weight of gravity, the blur of wind, and the echo of Gotham's vertical chaos. Nowhere is the synergy between digital and practical more striking than in the transformation of Harvey Dent into Two-Face. Nolan could have slapped on makeup prosthetics and achieved a decent effect. But instead, he worked with visual effects artists to digitally create the half-burned, sinewy, grotesque side of Dent's face, an open socket where an eye should be, exposed teeth, raw muscle. It's horrifying, but it's also restrained. The detailing is medically plausible, not monstrous. And because Aaron Eckhart's performance remains untouched, his eyes, his speech, his expressions, it allows the humanity of the character to persist despite the horror of his disfigurement. That's where CGI earns its place. Not to overwhelm, but to reveal something a camera can't capture alone. The Joker's visual chaos is also largely achieved with practical work. When he stages the bombing of the hospital, Nolan's crew literally detonated an abandoned building dressed as a hospital. There's no shortcut. The fireballs, the collapsing walls, the delayed explosion, it all really happened. Heath Ledger's brilliantly improvised reaction as he fiddles with the detonator amid real pyrotechnics only adds to the authenticity. And that's the key word here. Authenticity. Every fireball and collapsing wall helps sell the Joker as a true agent of chaos, not because you believe the character, but because you believe the world reacting to him. Even smaller elements are approached with this philosophy. Batman's sonar technology, while enhanced with visual effects, is rooted in noir-like aesthetics, monochrome, jagged outlines, pulsing sound waves. It doesn't feel like a sci-fi leap. It feels invasive, imperfect, and ethically questionable. The CGI is intentionally unsettling. It's not there to look cool. It's there to show the emotional and moral cost of Batman's surveillance, his gradual slip into Orwellian control. In this way, the visual effects carry narrative weight, not just visual flair. And let's not forget the choice to shoot major scenes in IMAX, a groundbreaking decision at the time. By filming sequences like the bank heist and the truck chase on 70mm IMAX film, Nolan ensured that the scale of Gotham felt towering, real, and intimidating. The use of IMAX doesn't require CGI enhancement. It relies on natural light, composition, and scale to immerse the viewer. In many ways, the grandeur of these visuals is achieved not through effects, but through absence of them, choosing a lens and film stock that magnifies the physical world instead of replacing it. This commitment to realism even extends to how characters interact with the environment. The Joker isn't surrounded by swirling digital chaos. He's in alleys, interrogation rooms, hospitals, and trucks. His menace comes not from visual effects but from practical dread. The camera often lingers on him without enhancements. No CGI flames. No effects-driven aura. Just a man with smeared makeup and a twisted ideology. And yet, his presence is more terrifying than any digital monstrosity because he feels like he could walk out of the screen. In the end, The Dark Knight's visual effects philosophy is defined by restraint, discipline, and narrative alignment. In The Dark Knight, set design and location scouting weren't just logistical steps in production. They were fundamental tools used to sculpt the psychological landscape of the film. Gotham City wasn't created in a studio vacuum, nor was it dressed up in ornate Gothic flair as in previous iterations. It was deliberately grounded in realism, mapped onto the real-world texture of Chicago's architecture, and painted with a sense of plausible decay. Every structure, every interior, every alley and bridge wasn't just visually compelling. They reflected the emotional chaos, social tension, and moral ambiguity that run through the film like a pulse. Let's start with Gotham itself, because it's more than a city. It's an evolving, breathing ecosystem. Nolan made the decision early on to shoot in Chicago, giving Gotham a tangible skyline, actual streets, and recognizable infrastructure. The use of real locations rather than CGI-generated skylines instantly anchors the film. When Batman launches himself from a rooftop or speeds through Lower Wacker Drive on the Batpod, the sense of place is unshakable. You're watching the city as it is, but in the context of the story, it becomes something else, an urban pressure cooker filled with moral decay, hidden dangers, and crumbling ideals. This realism bleeds into every location, making Gotham feel like a city worth saving, and one that might already be lost. Wayne Enterprises offices, housed in a sleek high-rise, are modern and minimalist, giving Bruce Wayne's public persona a clean, detached polish. The set design here is corporate. White walls, sharp lines, minimalist furniture, echoing Bruce's carefully curated identity as a disengaged billionaire. It's a sharp contrast to the makeshift bat bunker he operates out of, an empty space lit only by overhead fluorescence and the glow of his equipment. No Batcave waterfalls or giant penny here. This space is military-grade, brutalist, and purely functional. It reflects Batman's mindset at this stage in the trilogy, stripped of theatrics, focused entirely on war. Then there's the Joker, whose presence is always visually disruptive to his surroundings. His hideouts are chaotic, cluttered, anarchic. The burning mountain of cash stacked like a throne of corruption inside a warehouse isn't just a prop, it's a declaration. It speaks to his character louder than any line of dialogue. He doesn't want money. He wants to watch the world burn. The warehouse itself, with its dirty concrete walls, steel beams, and flickering lights, feels abandoned and forgotten, like a cancerous growth inside Gotham's underbelly. When he torches it, it doesn't just feel like a building going up in flames. It feels like a system being erased. One of the most hauntingly memorable sets is the hospital Joker blows up, because it's real. The production team found an actual building scheduled for demolition and wired it with explosives, creating a rare moment in modern cinema where destruction wasn't simulated. The physicality of it, the delayed blast, the surprise in Ledger's performance, the plumes of dust and fire, grounds the madness in reality. The building's layout, with long, empty halls and sterile, decaying decor, makes the scene both darkly comedic and unsettlingly believable. Now consider the ferry scene. Two boats, one filled with convicts, the other with civilians, each given a detonator that could blow up the other. But these aren't high-tech ships or stylized movie sets. They're industrial, grimy, and claustrophobic. Metallic walls, flickering lights, bleak, gray benches. The decision to keep these locations plain and cold allows the moral conflict to take center stage. There are no distractions, just people in a tin can, debating the weight of life and death. The simplicity of the set forces us to focus on their faces, their choices, and the unbearable silence between them. The Gotham Police Department interiors are equally grounded. The squad rooms are filled with desk clutter, flickering monitors, manila folders, and coffee-stained papers. This isn't a glossy cinematic vision of law enforcement. It's gritty and lived in. The interrogation room, where Batman confronts the Joker, is a masterclass in minimalist set design. One table, two chairs, a single light overhead, a blank wall. But the tension it builds is suffocating. That stark simplicity allows every word, every gesture, every breath to hang heavy in the room. There's nowhere to hide, no shadows to retreat into, no theatrics to lean on. Just raw, primal energy crackling between two forces of chaos and control. When Bruce visits Lucius Fox at Wayne Enterprises, the R and D-Lab and office spaces are sleek and clean, functioning almost like a contrast to the grimy streets below. These locations highlight the duality of Bruce Wayne's existence, privileged on one end, armored and scarred on the other. The sleek halls of Wayne Tower aren't just elegant, they're also sterile, impersonal, even isolating. The corporate side of Bruce's life feels like an echo chamber, devoid of connection, a perfect cover for a man who no longer believes in the system he finances. Even the outdoor scenes, like the rooftops where Gordon, Batman, and Dent meet, offer something more than just visual scope. These high vantage points are metaphorical. They're where ideals are exchanged, where characters rise above the city's filth to discuss justice and hope. Yet the concrete underfoot, the wind, the distance from the chaos below, all remind us that even up here, no one is truly safe or clean. These sets underscore how ideals can feel lofty, but always tethered to a city that pulls them down. Nolan's design team avoided embellishment for its own sake. Everything had a function. Props like the sonar devices, the Joker's handmade bombs, Batman's gauntlet-mounted blades, they weren't just cool. They were extensions of character. The sonar room, in particular, with its glowing blue wall of screens, is not just sci-fi. It's a visual representation of ethical compromise. It's sleek, intimidating, and deeply unsettling. The tunnels under the city, where Batman speeds through on the Batpod, are unadorned. No stylized neon or exaggerated features. just concrete and shadows. And it's perfect. These settings feel oppressive, like Gotham's own intestines, winding and filled with danger. The darkness of these spaces lets the few moments of artificial light feel invasive, like an X-ray into the city's sickness. From the opulence of Bruce's penthouse to the dingy corners of the Joker's hideouts, every location in The Dark Knight tells a story. They're not just places where things happen, they're part of why they happen. Gotham City in this film isn't a stage. It's a machine. Its gears grinding against each other, its wires fraying, its foundation rotting. The genius of the set design lies in how these environments seep into your subconscious, reinforcing the film's themes of duality, corruption, and the cost of justice without needing to scream them aloud. You don't just watch the world of The Dark Knight, you inhabit it. And once you're in, it doesn't let go. The dialogue in The Dark Knight is more than clever, it's surgical. It doesn't just move scenes forward, it defines characters, builds atmosphere, sharpens tension, and carves the film's moral core into every interaction. It's rare for a blockbuster to feature writing that's simultaneously intellectual, poetic, and natural, but that's exactly what the Nolan brothers achieve here. The screenplay operates on multiple levels: surface realism, character insight, and thematic resonance. It captures the pulse of a city on the brink, while also giving each character a voice that is unmistakably their own. Let's begin with the Joker, because his lines aren't just memorable, they're iconic, unpredictable, and dripping with twisted logic. He doesn't monologue for attention, he performs, manipulates, disorients. Every story he tells contradicts the last. One moment, he's recounting how his father gave him his scars. The next, he's describing how he did it himself for love. These aren't backstories, they're psychological warfare. He's controlling the narrative by never giving the truth. His words are like smoke, shifting, choking, beautiful, and terrifying. When he says, "I'm like a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do if I caught one," it's hilarious and horrifying. That one sentence dismantles the entire idea of him as a villain with a clear goal. He has no goal. That's the point. He's chaos incarnate. But it's not all philosophical musings. The Joker's wit is razor-sharp. "Let's put a smile on that face" is equal parts playful and petrifying. "You complete me" flips the cliché of romantic interdependence into something disturbingly codependent and nihilistic. His language is a weapon used to pull others into his mindset, and the brilliance lies in how often it works. Now contrast that with Bruce Wayne. His dialogue splits between two identities, billionaire playboy and vigilante detective. As Bruce, he speaks with dismissive charm, using sarcasm and aloofness to throw off anyone who might suspect his double life. "Rachel's told me everything about you." "I certainly hope not." That's Bruce in a nutshell, hiding behind quips and privilege. But when he's Batman, his voice drops, literally and tonally. The lines become clipped, blunt, utilitarian. He speaks like someone who doesn't want to waste time. "Swear to me" isn't just a line, it's an outburst of pure desperation, fury, and frustration. It shows Batman's need to control a world that refuses to be controlled. And when Batman does say something longer, it matters. His quiet monologue to Joker after saving him from the fall, "This city just showed you that it's full of people ready to believe in good," is delivered with weary defiance. It's not a boast. It's a plea. His dialogue isn't about heroism. It's about survival, ethical, psychological, and moral survival in a world cracking under pressure. Harvey Dent is a different linguistic beast. He speaks with the confidence of someone who still believes in systems. "The night is darkest just before the dawn" sounds like a campaign slogan, and that's exactly how it's meant to sound. Dent is a man clinging to hope, trying to elevate everyone around him with noble words. But as the story progresses, his sentences change. They become shorter, colder. "You thought we could be decent men in an indecent time." That line isn't just a reflection, it's an accusation. By the time he becomes Two-Face, the optimism vanishes, replaced by mechanical, fate-obsessed declarations. The world is cruel, and the only morality in a cruel world is chance. His lines are no longer speeches, they're verdicts. Ice cold, final, and terrifying. Alfred's dialogue serves as the film's conscience. He doesn't just offer advice, he delivers truths, dressed in the clothes of old war stories and moral riddles. Some men just want to watch the world burn. That's not exposition, it's soul reading. He doesn't need long speeches. A few lines from Alfred cut deeper than pages of dialogue from others. And he never lectures. He reflects. His tone is warm, but firm. When he tells Bruce, "You crossed the line first," it lands not as judgment, but as reality. He's the only character who can tell Batman he's wrong and be heard. Commissioner Gordon's language is all about duality. He's a man trying to follow rules in a ruleless world. He speaks with clarity, but also hesitation. When he says, "We have to chase him because he can take it," it's not just plot, it's emotional surrender. His final monologue is poetic, mythic, and devastating. It doesn't feel like writing, it feels like truth. It crystallizes everything the film has built toward. He's not a hero. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector, a dark knight. Those words don't just close the film, they redefine the superhero genre. Even minor characters are given sharp, layered dialogue. Maroni's lines ooze mobster bravado. "You can't kill me" out of some misplaced sense of self-righteousness. It's a dare wrapped in ego. Rachel's lines are full of grounded wisdom and personal clarity. She doesn't swoon. She sees Bruce for who he is. "You can't be both," she tells him. "Let me go." It's brutal, honest, and mature. Even Lau, with his clipped, corporate speech patterns, adds a cold realism to Gotham's global corruption. Every word he speaks feels like a contract clause, calculated and soulless. What makes all this work is that the dialogue never feels like dialogue. It feels like people thinking, feeling, calculating in real time. The humor, though rare, lands because it's dry, situational, and often comes at moments of intense pressure. The wit isn't added for flair, it's baked into the tension. And the emotional lines, especially those in the ferry scene, as civilians and prisoners debate who should live, don't feel preachy. They feel human, conflicted, real. The entire script balances philosophy and plot with surgical precision. It poses questions without answering them. It offers insight without delivering easy moral victories. And its dialogue doesn't just entertain, it echoes. It stays with you. It's quoted, studied, dissected not because it's flashy, but because it says something real about power, identity, fear, and sacrifice. That's why the script of The Dark Knight remains one of the most iconic in modern film. Because it doesn't just speak to its characters. It speaks through them, to all of us. When it comes to genre execution, The Dark Knight isn't merely playing by the superhero rulebook, it's rewriting it, tearing out the pages and scribbling in the margins. It doesn't just dip its toes into other genres, it dives headfirst into crime drama, psychological thriller, political allegory, even noir, all while dressed up as a big-budget superhero spectacle. The brilliance of the film lies in how seamlessly it fuses those genres without ever compromising tone or clarity. It stretches what a comic book film can be while still delivering everything audiences expect from a Batman story, and far more than they bargained for. Traditionally, superhero films follow a fairly predictable arc: hero rises, villain emerges, showdown ensues, city is saved, roll credits. But The Dark Knight doesn't take that route. Instead, it plants you in the middle of a crime-ridden Gotham that feels like a living, breathing organism, more Chicago than Metropolis, where justice is complicated and every act of heroism has a price. Batman is already established when the film begins. There's no origin retread, no tutorial. We hit the ground running, and rather than introduce a typical comic book villain, the film introduces an agent of chaos who immediately breaks every rule of genre logic. Let's take the Joker. In a conventional superhero film, the villain has a plan: world domination, money, revenge. But Joker? He doesn't want money. He doesn't care about power. He's not trying to win. He's trying to disrupt. That alone is a massive subversion of the genre's basic framework. He burns stacks of cash because he can. He rigs impossible moral scenarios because he wants to watch people fail, not physically but morally. He doesn't want to kill the hero. He wants to corrupt him. That's not a villain you fight with gadgets. That's a villain you fight with your soul. The film incorporates crime drama tropes so thoroughly it feels more like Heat or The Departed than Iron Man. You've got mob bosses, dirty cops, money laundering, high-stakes surveillance, underground deals. Gotham is less a fantasy metropolis and more a reflection of the real world's tangled bureaucracy and underworld economy. This isn't about laser battles or superpowered fists. It's about strategy, psychology, and systems failing in slow motion. And yet, even while it grounds itself in crime realism, it injects high-concept thriller elements. There's the Joker's social experiments, blowing up hospitals, forcing civilians and criminals to decide whether to kill each other, creating situations where traditional heroism simply can't win. Those moments don't come from the superhero genre playbook. They come from films like Saw, Say 7 or The Silence of the Lambs. They are terrifying not because of gore, but because of impossible moral calculus. The action sequences themselves, though fewer in number than many blockbusters, are densely packed and narratively driven. The armored truck chase isn't just an action beat. It's a turning point where Joker forces Batman to choose between saving lives or preserving the system. The destruction of Rachel and Harvey isn't just an explosion. It's the explosion of hope, of control, of the belief that good men can stay good in an unjust world. The Hong Kong extraction mission is pure spy thriller, executed with precision and minimal dialogue. These scenes are not filler. They're emotionally charged, thematically loaded, and meticulously choreographed. And somehow, amidst all this tension and moral darkness, the film finds room for humor. Not the winking, fourth-wall-breaking style you see in modern superhero fare, but a dry, character-rooted wit. Alfred's lines are steeped in wisdom and sarcasm. Lucius Fox's interactions with Bruce deliver sly corporate banter. Even Bruce, when playing the billionaire playboy, drops in ironic quips that feel authentic to his double life. And the Joker, terrifying as he is, still gets lines that walk the line between laughter and dread, lines that audiences quote because they're disturbingly funny in the way only truth can be. Dramatically, the film operates with the confidence of an epic. It tackles themes like terrorism, surveillance ethics, political compromise, and public manipulation, territory typically reserved for prestige drama, not summer blockbusters. It asks whether justice can be bought, whether order can be maintained without corruption, whether good men can operate in bad systems. And it doesn't wrap these questions up with a bow. It leaves them open, hanging unresolved. The genre is subverted not just by what happens, but by what doesn't happen. There's no clean victory, no triumphant music cue, no moment of release. Just choices, sacrifices, consequences. And perhaps most significantly, the ending of the film breaks the genre in half. Batman doesn't win, he loses deliberately. He takes the fall for Harvey's crimes to preserve hope in Gotham. That's not just a bold narrative choice. It's a complete inversion of how superhero stories usually end. There's no parade. There's no medal. Just a hero vanishing into the shadows, hunted by the very people he saved. It's the tragedy of myth, delivered in blockbuster form. What The Dark Knight achieves through its genre execution is nothing short of revolutionary. It proves that a superhero movie can be more than capes and catchphrases. It can be layered, provocative, morally complex, and even uncomfortable. It doesn't reject the genre, it elevates it. It respects its roots while pushing the branches in entirely new directions. It balances tension, action, character, and philosophy so tightly that the seams never show. It doesn't rely on cliches, it reinvents them. And in doing so, it becomes something more than a genre film. It becomes a genre statement. A declaration that superhero stories aren't just for escapism. They're capable of reflecting who we are, what we fear, and what we're willing to sacrifice in pursuit of something better. The Dark Knight doesn't just operate as a masterclass in storytelling and genre-bending superhero cinema. It doubles as a mirror reflecting the deepest anxieties of modern society. Its social and cultural commentary is intricately woven into every narrative thread, never overtly shouting its themes, but embedding them so organically into the plot, characters, and conflicts that the audience feels them on a subconscious level. This isn't a movie that explains what's wrong with the world. It shows you. Through masks, chaos, corruption, and ethical collapse, it forces the viewer to sit with uncomfortable truths about politics, power, and the fragility of civilization. Perhaps the most glaring thematic backbone of the film is its allegory for terrorism and fear in a post-9/11 world. The Joker is not your standard comic book villain. He is the personification of modern terrorism. Not motivated by ideology, money, or revenge, he seeks only to spread chaos, dismantle social structures, and destroy people's faith in order. His unpredictability, his disregard for life, and his willingness to die just to send a message are chillingly reminiscent of the kind of real-world threats that have haunted the 21st century. His acts, bombing public places, creating impossible moral dilemmas, rigging innocents against each other, highlight how terror operates not just through violence, but through the disintegration of moral certainty. The Joker doesn't just terrorize Gotham physically, he corrupts it psychologically. And that's where The Dark Knight elevates itself beyond the genre. It isn't interested in whether Batman can throw a better punch. It's interested in whether the people of Gotham will hold onto their principles when confronted with unfiltered chaos. The Joker rigs two ferries, one full of civilians, the other with prisoners, each given the power to blow the other up. It's a raw, brutal test of society's values, self-preservation versus empathy. The fact that neither ferry detonates the other is perhaps the film's faintest glimmer of hope, but the fear that they might is what holds the audience in silent horror. It's not just a question of who will survive, it's a question of who will stay human. This leads directly into the film's reflection on government surveillance and privacy. In one of the film's most ethically murky moves, Bruce Wayne builds a surveillance system using every phone in Gotham to locate the Joker. It's total, omnipresent, and terrifying, an echo of the surveillance state. Lucius Fox, Batman's trusted ally, is appalled. He agrees to help only once, on the condition that the system be destroyed immediately afterward. This subplot offers one of the film's most powerful commentaries. How far should a society go in the name of safety? How much freedom should we give up to feel protected? And more dangerously, can those who wield that power ever truly be trusted to let it go? And then there's Harvey Dent. His downfall is more than personal, it's philosophical. He begins as Gotham's great white hope, brave, incorruptible, and righteous. But once he suffers unimaginable loss, the film shows how easily righteousness curdles into rage. He becomes Two-Face, the embodiment of disillusionment, flipping a coin to determine who lives and who dies. Not because he wants to be fair, but because fairness is the only thing he can cling to in a world he believes has betrayed him. His arc comments on how quickly public heroes can fall, how trauma reshapes ethics, and how society often places its hopes in flawed individuals rather than resilient institutions. Media manipulation is also subtly dissected. The Joker turns the city into a stage, knowing full well that fear spreads faster than bullets. He threatens to kill people every day unless Batman reveals his identity, forcing the media and public to turn on their protector. It's a portrait of how easily a panicked society can be manipulated, how media can amplify fear, and how pressure from the public can compromise justice. The Joker doesn't need to destroy Gotham physically. He lets it destroy itself from the inside out. Class tension also simmers beneath the surface. Gotham is a city split in two, high society in their glittering towers and the rest scrambling in the streets. Bruce Wayne's billionaire status positions him uniquely. He fights for justice in a costume, but he still sleeps in penthouses. The Joker, meanwhile, moves through every social stratum, tearing down both the criminal underworld and the financial elite. He burns mob money in front of crime bosses and crashes a fundraiser for Gotham's wealthiest. He mocks both ends of the spectrum, showing that corruption and cowardice are everywhere. It's a brutal reminder that no class is immune to moral decay, and no amount of money can buy immunity from consequence. Even deeper, the film questions the legitimacy of heroism. Is Batman a savior or a vigilante? Is he protecting the city or feeding a cycle of escalation? The very existence of the Joker seems to be a reaction to Batman, a counterforce that exists precisely because someone dared to operate outside the law in the first place. The Joker even taunts him, "You complete me." In other words, the more Gotham fights crime unconventionally, the more unconventional the crime becomes. The film subtly critiques the idea of unilateral justice, suggesting that heroes who operate without accountability can cause just as much instability as the villains they oppose. And gender? Though not the focus of the story, Rachel Dawes' presence brings emotional grounding. She isn't a mere love interest, she's a moral barometer. Her belief in Harvey, her disappointment in Bruce, her bravery in the face of death, these aren't minor details. Her death is the emotional trigger for the film's darkest turn. Gotham loses its hope when it loses Rachel. That one moment turns idealism into vengeance, justice into revenge, and control into collapse. It's a sobering metaphor for how the loss of compassion and moral clarity can unravel even the most carefully maintained systems. Ultimately, The Dark Knight doesn't pretend to solve the world's problems. It holds up a mirror and dares you to look. It asks difficult questions. What is justice in a broken system? Can we hold on to our values when they cost us everything? Are our heroes any better than the villains they chase? And in the end, when faced with chaos, do we rise above it? Or do we become part of it? This film is more than spectacle. It's a parable, a reflection, a warning, and perhaps most importantly, it's an invitation to think, to question, and to realize that the line between order and chaos, right and wrong, hero and villain, is far thinner than we'd like to admit. Audience engagement in The Dark Knight doesn't rely on cheap thrills or fleeting spectacle. It's built from a cocktail of emotional tension, intellectual stimulation, and moral conflict that stays with viewers long after the screen fades to black. This is a film that doesn't just want your attention, it earns it over and over again. Every scene, every moment, every line of dialogue is engineered to strike at something deeper, something primal. Whether it's a gasp, a clenched fist, a teary eye, or a lingering silence, this film knows how to get a reaction, and not just once, but repeatedly through layered storytelling and thematic density that rewards multiple viewings. The audience is pulled into the film's atmosphere from the first beat. The opening heist isn't just action for the sake of action, it's a puzzle. A well-choreographed sequence that makes you curious, suspicious, impressed, and then completely unnerved by the time the Joker removes his mask. That moment doesn't just introduce the villain. It declares the movie's intention to shock, to twist, and to keep you guessing. Audiences lean in because they realize this isn't a movie you can coast through. You have to pay attention. The Joker's schemes aren't straightforward. The characters don't make easy choices, and no one, not even Batman, is safe from heartbreak or failure. And when viewers know that anything can happen, they sit forward. They engage. The moral dilemmas are a major reason why people don't just watch this film. They debate it, unpack it, argue over it. Was Batman right to hide the truth about Harvey Dent? Should Lucius Fox have helped create mass surveillance, even temporarily? Did the people on the ferry prove Joker wrong? Or did they simply hesitate long enough for the clock to run out? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're genuine ethical forks in the road that spark late-night conversations, online theories, and philosophical dissection. Every time a new viewer sees the film, they join that ongoing cultural conversation. And every returning viewer sees something new, something missed, something now seen in a different light. There's also emotional manipulation happening at a master level. But not manipulation that feels manufactured or forced, it's earned. When Rachel dies, the silence that follows is deafening. You don't need dramatic music or slow-motion shots. The film lets that grief breathe. You feel the weight on Bruce's shoulders, the devastation in Harvey's eyes, and the horror that everything just got worse, and there's no clean fix. That emotional gut punch is followed by transformation. Harvey becomes Two-Face. Batman becomes a scapegoat. Gordon becomes a liar for the sake of hope. These emotional shifts don't just affect the characters. They pull the audience through a cycle of sorrow, outrage, sympathy, and dread. Audience laughter is another tool used with precision. It's not overdone. It's not forced. But when the Joker tells someone, "Why so serious?" with a razor in his hand, it's the kind of line that makes people laugh not because it's funny, but because it's terrifying. Nervous laughter, the kind that bubbles up when you don't know what else to do, is something few films can elicit genuinely. The Dark Knight has those moments peppered throughout. Even Alfred's deadpan wisdom brings occasional warmth to a film steeped in dread. And that balance, the tension and release, keeps viewers emotionally invested without becoming numb. The rewatchability factor is through the roof. The first viewing is for plot and shock value. The second is to look closer at Ledger's micro-expressions, at Nolan's narrative layering, at the symbolic motifs hidden in the shadows. The third, fourth, and fifth viewings are to re-experience scenes like the hospital explosion or the interrogation room, moments that have become iconic because of the visceral reactions they evoke. There's a rhythm to the way people come back to this movie. Not just because they love it, but because they feel something each time, something slightly different depending on where they are in life or what new lens they're watching through. It also helps that the film never panders. It trusts the audience's intelligence. It gives you exposition through action, character through consequence, and themes through conflict, not through long speeches or spoon-fed monologues. That kind of trust creates engagement because viewers feel like they're in the film, solving the puzzle alongside the characters rather than passively watching someone else do it. It turns viewers into detectives, philosophers, and judges, constantly evaluating each twist and what it says about the world, about people, and about themselves. And then there's the cultural footprint. Audience engagement extends beyond the film itself and spills into fan art, memes, fan theories, cosplay, and homage. Lines like, "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain," have entered the cultural lexicon. Joker's monologues are quoted endlessly, not just because they're chilling, but because they resonate with unnerving clarity. Everyone who's seen The Dark Knight has that scene, that quote, that moment they bring up when talking about the movie. And that's how you know a film has truly connected. This film doesn't just hold your attention. It demands emotional investment, intellectual engagement, and ethical reflection. It makes you sit through moral discomfort and psychological tension, then turns that experience into something unforgettable. It's the kind of movie that gets into your bloodstream, haunts your thoughts, elevates your expectations, and stays with you long after the projector shuts off. That's audience engagement at its most powerful, and The Dark Knight is soaked in it. In terms of genre execution, The Dark Knight doesn't merely meet expectations. It rewrites the rules of what a superhero film can be. It's not confined by capes and catchphrases. Instead, it explodes past them, blending psychological thriller, crime noir, and moral drama into one unstoppable cinematic force. This isn't a film that follows a formula. It dismantles the formula in real time and rebuilds something richer, darker, and more human. The superhero genre, by design, tends to follow an arc we've all grown familiar with. Origin story, rise of a villain, internal crisis, final showdown, roll credits with hope restored. But The Dark Knight takes that template and throws a wrench into every beat. There's no origin story here. No comforting beginning. We enter in the middle of chaos, with a silent masked man standing atop a building and a bank heist that ends in betrayal and bloodshed. From that moment on, the film signals that nothing will be safe, clean, or predictable. This is a story about consequence, escalation, and what happens when ideals are tested to the brink. Instead of the usual clear-cut hero versus villain dynamic, Nolan introduces a three-part collision: Batman, Joker, and Harvey Dent. Each represents a different force, order, chaos, and justice, and their intertwining arcs elevate the genre's conflict into a philosophical battlefield. The Joker, especially, doesn't want to rule the city or destroy it. He wants to corrupt its soul, to prove that even heroes can fall. That's not typical villain logic. That's existential warfare. And it makes the stakes not just physical, but ideological. You're not watching a hero punch a villain. You're watching ideas clash, unravel, and leave scorched earth behind. What really sets The Dark Knight apart in its genre is that it dares to question the hero himself. Batman isn't presented as flawless or infallible. He's tormented, not only by his past, but by the implications of his actions. Is he helping Gotham or making things worse? Is he inspiring copycats, escalating violence, blurring the lines between justice and vengeance? These are questions most superhero movies dare to ask.
But this one lives in them.
It forces Bruce Wayne to wrestle with the cost of his dual identity and, ultimately, to choose between being a hero or preserving the idea of one. That internal conflict gives the film its emotional backbone and makes the genre feel more adult, more grounded, more reflective. Even the action, usually the most predictable part of the genre, is executed with an eye for realism and consequence. The truck chase is a masterclass in tension, not because of explosions or spectacle, but because of how the stakes are built beat by beat, decision by decision. It's not about style. It's about psychology. Every moment is designed to escalate pressure, not just adrenaline. When Batman flips the truck, it's not a moment of triumph. It's a moment of control, a silent war move in a larger game of chaos. And then there's the ferry sequence. 2 boats, 1 detonator, and the Joker watching with glee. This is pure genre subversion. Where most films would use this moment for a big explosive finale, The Dark Knight pauses. It lets silence build tension. It asks what kind of people we really are when pushed to the edge. And instead of delivering a fiery climax, it delivers a moral one. The people on those boats don't choose violence. They choose restraint. And in doing so, they break the Joker's worldview. It's not Batman who defeats him. It's the people of Gotham. That's genre storytelling turned on its head. Most superhero films lean on big battles and grand finales. But The Dark Knight is all about the in-between moments, the interrogation scene that feels like a pressure cooker, the rooftop argument between allies who've lost faith, the quiet resignation when Batman agrees to take the fall for Harvey's crimes. These are the kinds of scenes that genre films rarely dwell on, but here, they're the heart of the story. Where many superhero films tie things up with a clean victory, The Dark Knight leaves things shattered. The hero is hunted, the villain laughs despite defeat, and the public loves in a lie for the sake of peace. There's no medal ceremony, no celebration. Just Gordon telling his son that Batman is the hero Gotham deserves, but not the one it needs. That's not a genre trope. That's a gut punch. In blending crime thriller, philosophical drama, and blockbuster action, The Dark Knight doesn't just excel in its genre. It bends the genre around its own ambitions. It raises the bar not just for superhero movies, but for storytelling in general. It proves that these stories, when taken seriously and treated with care, can explore moral complexity, human fallibility, and societal truth. It's not a superhero film that happens to be great. It's a great film that happens to wear a cape. And that's a distinction that forever changed the genre landscape. The symbolism and metaphors in The Dark Knight are not just subtle flavor. They're structural beams holding up the entire story. This isn't a movie that tosses in a symbol or two for flair. It builds a whole world where nearly every moment, character, and decision echoes something deeper. It's a film that rewards rewatching, not just because of its thrilling plot, but because its symbolic architecture is so intricately layered, you keep discovering more. Let's take a deeper look at Batman himself, not just the hero, but the symbol he chooses to become. His transformation from a man with a mission to a myth with a burden is the very soul of the film. Batman is constantly framed as a shadow, a presence lurking at the edge of light. His suit is matte black, his voice is gravel and growl, and he's barely glimpsed by civilians.
But it's all by design.
He wants to be more than human. He wants to be a symbol of fear. And that fear becomes his weapon. But as the Joker proves, symbols don't remain in the hands of their creators for long. The film quietly raises the question, when your symbol spreads fear, how long before it spreads fear in the wrong direction? How long before the symbol itself becomes dangerous? Contrast that with Harvey Dent, the White Knight, the shining hope. Before he becomes Two-Face, Dent is all about clean justice, accountability, and taking crime down through the proper channels. He represents what Gotham could be. And it's no accident that he's bright-eyed, well-dressed, golden lit in every scene. His face is open, visible, honest. But then he falls, literally and symbolically. The acid-burned face isn't just grotesque makeup. It's a living metaphor. One side is idealism, the other is rage. One side is justice, the other is revenge. And he doesn't flip between them. He becomes both at once. His coin, which earlier seemed like a harmless gimmick, now becomes a weapon of fate. The same object, repurposed. Just like Dent himself. It's a perfect metaphor for how trauma can twist righteousness into something brutal. And Joker, his entire identity is metaphoric chaos. Unlike Batman and Dent, he's not even pretending to be real. He's more like a myth walking in flesh. He doesn't care about wealth, power, or survival. His goal is ideological combustion. His stories about his scars shift every time because he has no past. He's a walking contradiction. His smile is carved pain. His clown makeup mocks joy while delivering terror. He doesn't symbolize madness, he is madness. Unexplained. Unstoppable. Not there to win, just there to watch the world burn. He's a metaphor for how little it takes to push a civilized society off its foundations. And the scariest part? He never lies about it. Everything he says about chaos, fear, corruption, it all turns out to be true. He becomes Gotham's harshest mirror. The city itself, Gotham, is more than a setting. It's a metaphor for us. For our systems, our institutions, our morality. Its crumbling infrastructure, its corrupt officials, its desperate citizens. It all reflects a world on the edge. Every alley and skyscraper is soaked in moral rot. The fairy sequence at the climax drives this home. 2 boats, 2 detonators, each told to kill the other to survive. It's the Joker's ultimate metaphor. Fear divides and fear destroys. But when neither side pulls the trigger, Gotham wins a symbolic victory. For once, ordinary people defy the rules of chaos. The city's soul remains intact. And that act, that rejection of fear, is arguably the moment the Joker loses. Not in a physical battle, but in a symbolic war. Technology, too, becomes symbolic. Batman's surveillance system, which uses sonar and taps into every phone in Gotham, is a metaphor for ethical overreach in the name of security. It's a commentary on how easily good intentions can lead to dangerous power. Lucius Fox's discomfort with it isn't just personal, it's a stand-in for societal anxiety. When Fox says he won't work with that system unless it self-destructs, it becomes more than a character decision. It's a symbolic act of drawing a line in the sand. Ethics must have boundaries, even in a world this broken. Even minor details brim with metaphor. Take the burning pile of money. Most villains in cinema hoard wealth. Joker destroys it. Because to him, money is meaningless. He doesn't care about control through economy. He wants control through ideology. And burning the cash isn't just shock value. It's a symbol of detachment, of showing that what we value, he rejects. It's a statement that fear is more effective than finance. Or the bat symbol itself, burning across a building at the end. That's not just a logo. It's Batman's message to Gotham that even in darkness, the symbol will remain. Even when bruised, hunted, and hated, the idea endures. It's myth-making in the purest cinematic sense. And let's not forget Gordon. He represents the civilian conscience of the film. A man who sees everything, suffers loss, makes compromises, and keeps going anyway. His narration at the end, he's the hero Gotham deserves, but not the one it needs right now, isn't just a line. It's the final metaphor. Batman doesn't get applause. He doesn't get recognition. He gets silence, shadows, and blame. Because sometimes the true hero is the one who lets the myth survive, even if it means the man beneath it must vanish. So when we talk about The Dark Knight as layered, it's not just about story complexity. It's about how meaning is folded into every visual, every prop, every line of dialogue. Nothing is wasted. Every scar has a story. Every coin flip carries weight. Every shadow on Batman's face has purpose. The film isn't just speaking to the audience. It's whispering under its breath, daring you to look closer. And when you do, what you find isn't just a movie. It's a parable, A riddle, a mirror. It's a modern myth built out of symbols that don't fade after the credits roll. They stay with you, unsettling and alive. Franchise-wise, The Dark Knight isn't just the second chapter of Nolan's trilogy. It's the gravitational center, the critical turning point that reorients the direction of Batman's cinematic legacy and reshapes the superhero genre entirely. When Batman Begins hit theaters, it laid the foundation, a gritty, grounded reboot of a character that had grown campy and bloated by the late 90s. It gave us the why of Batman, his trauma, his mission, the creation of the myth. But The Dark Knight dives into what happens when that myth collides with the real world and the ripple effect it causes within a morally fragile society. It's where the ideas planted in the first film start to bloom and wither. The entire trilogy is framed around escalation, and The Dark Knight is where that escalation becomes frighteningly real. At the end of Batman Begins, Commissioner Gordon warns Bruce, "Criminals will adapt. And you're wearing a mask," he says. In comes the Joker, a villain who is not just a product of Gotham's corruption, but arguably a direct response to Batman's presence. This film introduces the idea that symbols have consequences. Batman created fear to fight crime, but in doing so, he inspired something far more dangerous, a man who is fear, chaos, and unpredictability incarnate. The Joker isn't just a villain in this film. He's the living manifestation of the unintended consequences of Batman's war on crime. This dynamic fundamentally shifts the tone and stakes of the trilogy. Where Batman Begins was a character origin, The Dark Knight is a moral collapse. Bruce enters the story thinking he can hang up the cowl, that Harvey Dent can carry the torch of justice within the system. But the Joker annihilates that hope, and the film's ending seals Batman's fate not as a victorious hero, but as a self-imposed villain. It's a radical departure from traditional superhero arcs. There's no clean victory, no trophy to raise. Instead, the hero chooses to be misunderstood, hunted, and hated because preserving the ideal, Harvey's image, is more important than the truth. That twist redefines Batman's character and casts a long shadow over The Dark Knight Rises, which has to deal with the consequences of that lie. And from a broader genre standpoint, The Dark Knight marked a historical shift in how superhero films were perceived. Before it, superhero movies, even the good ones, were still largely rooted in spectacle, origin tropes, and comic book-style morality. Nolan blew the walls off that mold. He made a crime epic that happened to have Batman in it, drawing from the aesthetics and tension of Michael Mann's Heat and weaving in post 9/11 anxieties about surveillance, terrorism, and societal fragility. This wasn't just a superhero movie, it was a modern myth with thematic gravity. It used Gotham to reflect the moral struggles of real cities. It showed a world where doing the right thing might mean becoming the villain. Suddenly, studios were greenlighting dark and grounded takes on everything from Superman to Spider-Man, hoping to replicate the Dark Knight formula. But few understood what made it work. It wasn't the darkness. It was the ethical complexity. Historically, The Dark Knight also captures the spirit of its time. Released in 2008, it emerged in the thick of global economic tension, political disillusionment, and cultural fear. The Joker's ideology, that all it takes is one bad day to unravel civilization, felt alarmingly plausible. The fairy scene is essentially a social experiment in ethics under duress, echoing real-life fears about how people behave in crisis. And Batman's sonar surveillance system, tapping into every phone in Gotham, triggered debates about privacy, government overreach, and the cost of security, paralleling real-world concerns about the Patriot Act and mass surveillance programs. The film doesn't hammer these points. It reflects them through story and character, using fiction to comment on reality with haunting precision. Within the trilogy, The Dark Knight also cements its place by introducing irreversible change. Harvey Dent's rise and fall isn't just tragic, it's the moral collapse of Gotham's best hope. And that collapse isn't swept under the rug. It becomes the core lie around which Gotham's peace is built in The Dark Knight Rises. That peace is artificial, fragile, and when it breaks, the city's reckoning with the truth becomes the emotional core of the finale. So while Batman Begins sets up the myth, The Dark Knight shatters it, and Rises tries to rebuild it, but under entirely new principles. Without this middle chapter's devastating events, the trilogy's conclusion would lack depth and purpose. Even the Joker's legacy bleeds into the final film. Though he doesn't appear, his chaos lingers like a scar over Gotham. The city doesn't just fear crime, it fears the idea of total moral collapse. Bane in Rises inherits the Joker's philosophy, but takes it from psychological to physical, leading a full revolution. That revolution only matters because of what the Joker exposed. Gotham is breakable. In the timeline of Batman films overall, The Dark Knight is often considered the gold standard. It moved the character from comic book icon to cinematic legend. It showed audiences that these stories could be as rich, serious, and thematically resonant as any Oscar contender. And it did this without ever losing its entertainment value. It's gripping, shocking, funny, and heartbreaking, but also intellectual and daring in a way few genre films have matched since. So whether you look at it within its own trilogy, in the larger Batman filmography, or in the broader landscape of superhero cinema, The Dark Knight is a franchise milestone and a historical pivot point. It didn't just build on what came before, it changed everything that came after. It raised the ceiling. It altered expectations. And it redefined what audiences could demand from a film where a man wears a cape and fights crime in the dark. Let's talk about the size and scale of The Dark Knight not just as a movie, but as a financial phenomenon. Warner Brothers invested a sizable budget, reportedly around $185 million, into this second chapter of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, a figure that easily positioned it among the most expensive films of its time. But the fascinating thing is that The Dark Knight never feels bloated or wasteful. Instead of funneling the budget into flashy excess, Nolan used it like a scalpel. Every dollar served the story. Every set piece had a narrative purpose, and every practical effect carried weight. The budget wasn't spent on spectacle for its own sake. It was spent on building a Gotham City that looked, sounded, and felt like a living, breathing metropolis on the verge of collapse. From a production standpoint, the scale is obvious. That breathtaking truck flip during the armored convoy sequence? Done for real, not digitally. The hospital explosion? Shot practically with real charges, real rubble, and one take. Even the use of IMAX cameras, rare at the time for full-blown features, meant a significant chunk of the budget went toward achieving clarity and immersion in key action scenes. This was a film built with confidence in its visual storytelling and a refusal to rely on green screen trickery unless absolutely necessary. The scope of the production wasn't just big, it was meticulously orchestrated. But what really turns this budget story into legend is the box office return. When The Dark Knight opened in July 2008, it exploded into theaters like a force of nature. It made over $158 million in its opening weekend in North America alone, breaking records and instantly establishing itself as a cultural juggernaut. The domestic box office run went on to exceed $530 million. Globally, it crossed the billion-dollar mark, raking in more than $1.005 billion by the end of its theatrical run. That kind of profit margin turned heads across the industry. It wasn't just a hit, it was an earth-shaker. The film's financial success can't be chalked up to the Batman brand alone. Batman Begins was well-received, but not a runaway success. What turned The Dark Knight into a billion-dollar event was a convergence of factors. First, there was the allure of Heath Ledger's chilling turn as the Joker, an eerie, magnetic performance that became a centerpiece of the film's marketing, especially after Ledger's untimely death. The tragic circumstances drew global attention, and his haunting portrayal sparked endless discussion and repeat viewings. Then there was Nolan's storytelling, which aimed far beyond traditional comic book fare. This wasn't a film aimed just at teenagers and superhero fans. It reached adults who usually rolled their eyes at capes and gadgets. The story dealt with terrorism, ethics, chaos, and the cost of heroism. The film tapped into real-world anxieties, post-9/11 fear, surveillance politics, and moral ambiguity in a time of global unrest. Audiences didn't just watch The Dark Knight for thrills. They dissected it, wrote about it, recommended it, and went back again. The marketing was revolutionary. Warner Brothers didn't just drop trailers and posters. They launched one of the most innovative viral marketing campaigns ever seen. Fans were invited into a game that included interactive websites, real-world scavenger hunts, secret screenings, and mysterious clues leading up to the release. By the time the film arrived, there was a fever pitch of anticipation. And when audiences saw that it delivered, not just in terms of action, but in terms of weighty drama and iconic performances, it exploded into a phenomenon. Even the film's IMAX release strategy played a financial role. It was one of the first major blockbusters to shoot sequences specifically for IMAX, and the draw of seeing those segments in giant screen format pushed viewers to premium screenings, often more than once. That helped boost the per-screen average and contributed significantly to its long legs in theaters. What's more impressive is that The Dark Knight wasn't just a box office success in the moment. It had staying power. It dominated home video sales, it drove merchandise, it influenced how future blockbusters were budgeted, and it redefined what a summer movie could be. And on top of all that, it led directly to the Academy Awards, overhauling their Best Picture field. After snubbing The Dark Knight for a Best Picture nomination, backlash was so strong that the Academy expanded the category to 10 nominees the following year. That's not just cultural relevance. That's financial success rewriting the rules of the industry. So when you look at The Dark Knight through the lens of budget and box office, it's not a simple story of dollars in and dollars out. It's the story of a film that took blockbuster money, refused to follow blockbuster rules, and built a legend that earned every cent of its billion-dollar haul. It didn't just succeed. It shifted the way Hollywood does business. And to this day, studios are still chasing that perfect storm of critical acclaim, audience obsession, and financial dominance that The Dark Knight captured so effortlessly. If you're gearing up to watch The Dark Knight, you're not just pressing play on another superhero movie. You're stepping into one of the most immersive, celebrated cinematic experiences of the 21st century. So where and how you watch it truly shapes the impact. This is a film that goes beyond its genre. It demands a setting where tension, visual depth, and emotional gravity can hit you at full force. That means choosing your platform wisely, and ideally, choosing the biggest, clearest screen and sharpest sound setup you can find. Let's talk theatrical first. If you ever see The Dark Knight returning to theaters for a limited run, a Nolan marathon, or a special anniversary IMAX event, go. Don't think twice. Christopher Nolan specifically shot several sequences using IMAX cameras, and he did it long before it became a trend. These sequences aren't cropped or stretched. They expand vertically, filling the entire screen with staggering clarity. Watching it in IMAX is like being dropped into the middle of Gotham. You don't just watch the truck flip on that downtown street. You feel it in your bones. You don't just see Batman soaring through Hong Kong's skyline. You feel the vertigo. No home setup, no matter how good, can replicate the spatial immersion of those 70mm visuals paired with theater-grade surround sound. So if that opportunity ever pops up, especially at a retro cinema or a premium screen event, grab your ticket and thank yourself later. Now, realistically, most people will catch The Dark Knight from home, and that's perfectly fine, because it's also one of the best films to revisit in high definition. The movie is often made available on premium streaming platforms, especially those affiliated with DC or Warner Brothers libraries. Whether it's included in a subscription catalog or rented individually, it usually pops up in full HD or 4K with HDR enhancements. Look for the 4K version, if possible. This film thrives on contrast between shadow and light, order and chaos, calm and explosive violence. Every flicker of flame, every smear of grease paint on the Joker's face, every thread in the batsuit, these visual textures become more vivid when viewed in a high-fidelity format. And don't underestimate the power of your audio setup. The Dark Knight isn't just visually rich, it's sonically overwhelming in the best way. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score isn't just music, it's a pulse. Joker's theme creeps in like a buzzsaw, ramping up dread in scenes before a single line is spoken. The action sequences are filled with bone-rattling bass and precision sound design. Gunfire, crashes, echoing footsteps in interrogation rooms. It's all calibrated to punch you in the chest. Watching with a decent pair of headphones or a surround system turns your living room into a war zone between chaos and justice. If you're the type who loves exploring deeper layers, then physical media might be your best bet. The Blu-ray and UHD editions are packed with features, making of documentaries, interviews, IMAX breakdowns, and insight into the meticulous planning behind each shot and stunt. Watching these extras alongside the film transforms your appreciation for it. You begin to see how every frame was sculpted, how every performance was measured for maximum effect. And it makes every rewatch that much richer. There's also a unique benefit to how The Dark Knight plays on repeat viewings. Unlike many blockbusters that rely on plot twists or action gimmicks, this film gains weight the more you revisit it. You start to notice how often characters lie, how dialogue echoes themes of control and anarchy, how Nolan uses composition and silence as tools of suspense. The Joker's dialogue starts sounding more like philosophy than villainy. Harvey Dent's descent becomes more tragic with hindsight. Bruce Wayne's loneliness becomes sharper. Watching it again, on a rainy night, in solitude, or with friends ready to debate morality and chaos, it always delivers something new. So whether you're watching on a streaming service late at night with the lights off, experiencing the film with a collector's edition box set on disc, or, if you're lucky, catching it in IMAX where Nolan meant for it to shine, The Dark Knight is a film that adapts to the scale of your commitment. The more seriously you take the viewing experience, the more it gives back. It's not a film to skim through. It's a film to fall into. Fully. Repeatedly. And, if possible, louder than your neighbors would prefer.